I'm Linda Abraham, president and founder of Accepted. I've been a medical school admissions consultant for 27 years, since 1994, and I'm going to be presenting today's masterclass. A few items worth noting before we get started. If you've not yet downloaded your webinar worksheet, take a second to do so. I suggest that you print it out. That's my recommendation. I think it will help you get the most from today's presentation. And Carly has just posted the link to the worksheet. So if you haven't printed it out yet or downloaded it yet, please do so now. And obviously, if you prefer to take notes on something else, that's fine too. I'd like to test your hand-raising skill. I know we're all Zoom experts, but let's try it, okay? Please raise your hand if you are attending this webinar because you want to become a physician, your dream career. Okay, great. The overwhelming majority of you are here for the right reason and know how to use Zoom. That's good to know. All right. We're going to use a question window for your questions and have scheduled time for a Q&A at the end of the masterclass. Please feel free to post your questions at any time during the presentation. And we're using the chat window for your answers to my open-ended questions. So it's just going to work a whole lot better if your questions go in the question window. I'll be able to go through a lot more of them. And then the chat window, again, is for your responses to my open-ended questions. Now, I'm told that some people attending a webinar really are interested in the special that we sometimes provide at the end of the webinar. They're even so anxious that anxiety takes away from their focus. I don't want that to happen to you, so here's the special for registrants at this webinar. $100 off any order over $12.50, and that is good through, I guess, July 12th, okay? Now, before diving into the heart of the webinar, I do like to learn a little bit about my audience. I learned a little bit about where you're located before we formally started, but we're going to post a poll now. And the poll is going to ask you first, I'm a first-time applicant or reapplicant? And the options are, I'm a first-time applicant or reapplicant, with 89% having voted. The results are 76% of you are first-time applicants and 24% are reapplicants. Okay, great. Thank you. And then the next question I have for you is, which best describes you? I'm planning ahead for secondaries, but haven't yet submitted my MCAS application. I submitted my MCAS or primary application, I should say, not just MCAS, but haven't yet received any secondaries, or I already started receiving secondaries. And again, it's not just MCAS, it should be really primary. All right. And again, with 89% having voted, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's share the results. So 24% of you have not yet submitted your MCAS. 12% have submitted the MCAS, but not started receiving secondaries. And 65%, ooh, that's pretty good, already receiving secondaries. Good for you. Wonderful. Thank you for that. All right. So you're knee deep. Congratulations. You've started down the road to medical school and the achievement of your career dreams. Still, you have quite a journey in front of you. But the next leg, if you've already submitted the MCAS, and most of you have quite clearly, are the secondary applications. Roughly almost 3/4 of you have, more than 3/4 of you. And that's the topic of today's webinar. Now, the plan for the webinar is first to discuss conceptually what secondary essays are, the similarities and differences between them and the primary, and then the common types, some very common types of secondaries with advice on how you can respond. I'm also going to give you some suggestions on writing tips. I'm going to give you some writing tips on dealing with tight word and character limits. And we're going to discuss briefly the timing, importance of timing and prompt responses, turning them around in terms of the secondaries. And then I'll close with a couple of tips on how to check your essays. And for those of you who haven't worked on the primary yet, you can use those tips. You can use almost all the writing tips and the checking tips, the editing tips for your primary application also. Now, let's first start with, what are secondary applications? For those of you who are new to the process, secondary applications are sent out after schools have received your primary application, and they're sent by individual medical schools, not MCAS. Secondary applications typically contain anywhere from one long essay up to 9 required essays. I think that's the longest one I've heard of, and that particular one has 4 optional essays. The purpose of the secondaries, okay, let's discuss that now. Now, like the primary, secondary application that asks for more than a fee is trying to learn more about you. They're trying to get to know you. They are trying to see if you fit. And your job is to help them get to know you. In this regard, the secondaries have a similar purpose to the personal statement on the primary application, along with the experience sections of the primary application. And now, if you could share with me in the chat window, how do secondaries differ from the primary application, whether it's the MCAS or the ACOMAS, specifically the personal statement part of it? Specific to school's mission. Excellent, Emily. 100%. They're different for each school. That's right, Lily. Anything else? Looking to identify your fit that school values. That's right, Devon. You're all getting it. You're doing a really good job. The purpose of the MCAS is to show your fitness and motivation for becoming a physician. The purpose of the secondaries is to show fit with a specific school, the school whose secondary you are filling out. And to achieve that goal, you need to do 3 things. You need to show that you appreciate the school's approach to medical education, and in that regard, that it fits you. You need to show that your goals as a physician align with the school's strengths. For example, primary care versus specialties or research, urban medicine versus rural medicine, that kind of thing. And you need to show fit with the school's mission. So you must answer the questions posed. And that's very different from the personal comments section or even the most meaningful experience essays on the primary, because they're not tied to a specific school or program. You just need to talk about yourself there. That's hard enough. In the case of the secondary, you are trying to show fit with a particular school. The third key difference, this is one that I don't think any of you mentioned, is that your secondary should complement and build on the stories and experiences discussed in the primary. If you are talking about something that you already discussed in the primary, then you need to go into greater depth or approach that experience from a different perspective. But paraphrasing or merely repeating material found in the primary is really a wasteful mistake. It's a mistake because you're going, the reader could get irritated, and it's wasteful because you're missing an opportunity to give them more reasons to admit you. Now, you can also write about something, and should try and write about something that has happened since you submitted the primary or happened earlier and isn't in the primary. That's a great way to go on your secondaries. The fourth key difference between the primary and the secondary, and this may not be entirely relevant for all of you, is time pressure. You knew when the primary was, the primary application service provider was opening up. I was going to start processing your applications, and you knew it for months. But we recommend that you turn around secondaries in about 2 weeks from time of receipt, and you don't necessarily know when you're going to receive them. So these similarities and differences mean that you have what I like to call the 6 secondary commandments. All right, 6 secondary commandments. And let's go through them. The first one is you want the secondary to help them get to know you. Again, that's something very similar with the primary. But that implies that you don't want to just repeat what's in the primary because they already know that. They already have that information. You want to show that you appreciate the school's approach to medical education, small groups versus large classes, systems-based learning, team-based learning, whatever it is. You need to show that's what you seek and how you thrive. You need to demonstrate that your goals align with the school's strengths. You need to answer the specific question posed, not the one you want to answer, and not the one that you answered for the previous school or the previous application, but the one posed in this application in such a way where, and here's number 5, it complements and builds on the stories and experiences discussed in the primary application and in other parts of this application. Should fit like a puzzle, right? Presenting a picture of you. And the last one is you want to return secondaries promptly. Now, so those are your commandments as you're approaching the secondaries. Let's discuss for a moment common secondary question types, and admittedly in fairly broad terms, okay? The first one are questions about you. Second type are questions about the school. And the third one is about the intersection between you and the school. And they really are different types. And you should, as you're approaching questions, you should think about, okay, which one is it? And this pretty much covers the universe of questions that schools will ask on secondary applications. So let's look at the first group, questions about you. You could find yourself with one long autobiographical essay or several short questions about you. And here's a question from Baylor. Indicate any special experiences, unusual factors, or this was at least from last year, that question, or other information you feel would be helpful in evaluating you, including but not limited to education, employment, extracurricular activities, prevailing over adversity. You may expand upon, but not repeat, MCAS application information, and there's a 2,000 character limit. That's somewhere between 400 and 500 words. So again, this one allows you a lot of choice. Could be challenges overcome. There could be other types of questions along these lines, multiple questions, maybe one's about challenges overcome. One could be about your most rewarding experience, one about leadership, one about teamwork experiences, any special interests in a particular area of medicine, any special interests outside of medicine. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? All of these are questions about you. In responding to these questions, you want to include information not provided in the primary or other parts of the secondary. If the perfect experience to address the question was in the MCAS, then try and approach it from a different angle or provide greater depth and detail about the experience, but don't just provide what's in the MCAS. Now, you can cover formative and revealing events. I'd stay away from childhood events, or if you mention childhood events, mention them very briefly, and really, really try and focus on college and post-college adulthood. They want to know you as a person. What kind of information would you include about yourself? And you want to give me some suggestions in the chat window? What kind of information would you like a medical school to know about yourself? Again, formative and revealing events. Anybody want to share in the chat window? Looking to identify, well, you already have, that was from before. You want to share that? What kind of events? I'm a parent. Okay. Now, many people are parents, so I think you're going to have to go into a little bit more depth there if that's going to be a distinctive kind of experience. If you worked through college, how that affected your perspective, your family life. Okay. Also, it would, if you have a high GPA, it would make that even more impressive. And if you had a lower than average GPA, obviously you were dealing with something that many, many other students weren't dealing with. Okay, good. Anybody else? Can you use this essay as your COVID-19 essay prompt? That would depend on what else is asked in the application. Okay, if there's a COVID-19 essay prompt, I would use, that. You have to, again, you can't just look at it and say, well, I'm always going to use this experience for this kind of question, because the application itself will ask for different things. If you took a postbac or master's, would this be a good place to mention it? I don't think so, frankly, because they know that from your transcript. Unless there was some experience during your program that was particularly influential. So again, you don't want to be giving them information that they already have. Now, to answer this question, you might want to use a timeline you've created of your life that includes all significant events and or an updated copy of your resume or CV. Now, I know that we've gone back to high school, etc., and I don't think there's anything wrong in having it on your timeline, but you're going to want to focus your application much more on college and post-college. Usually when you discuss, when I've read essays where the applicant discussed events and experiences from childhood and high school, they ended up seeming somewhat immature. And that's obviously not the impression you want to make. If they focused on more recent events, then almost always they had a more mature perspective on those events. And if you focus very much on earlier events, the question becomes, well, what have you been doing lately? So while yes, it's on here, I would really try and focus on the right side of this timeline. Check off the items you've already covered in your primary application, and looking at the list from the remaining items that you've not covered, which are related to the questions posed, which are related to clinical, research, work, or leadership and community service, which best answer questions. Now, are there any items that relate to how you overcame adversity? That's something that medical schools definitely value. And if you can strategically select the activities or events that will reveal more about you as a person, again, you can choose the events that best, the experiences that best answer the individual questions, or if it's a longer essay question, perhaps you can combine them with a theme and a coherent outline. But you want to be strategic and make sure that the different essays complement each other, complement the primary, and are showing fit with the secondary, with the school that sent you the secondary. Now, what about COVID questions? Emily mentioned COVID questions. I want to caution you, many questions will ask, how did COVID affect you? And that's fine. You should say how it affected you. Did it mean you couldn't volunteer? Did it, I hope not, make somebody very close to you sick, make you sick? Did somebody lose their, did you lose your job? Did somebody important to you lose their job? That is a legitimate response to those kinds of questions. But I would encourage you to go beyond that and also say how you responded to COVID. Don't just limit it to how it affected you, because then you're just passive. Show how you grabbed the opportunity that COVID also presented to help others. Okay. Now, what about essay questions about the schools? So for example, Weill Cornell asks, please write a brief statement giving your reasons for applying to Weill Cornell. This is a variation of probably the most common question about schools, and that is, why do you want to go to the school? And in order to answer it, you really have to know something about the school you're applying to, and you have to know what's important to you in a medical school. They're looking to see here how much you know about their school and why it's important to you to attend their school. And it's important that you do your research before responding to these kinds of questions. What are some ways you can find out more about a school? In the chat window, please. Where will you look to get information? Okay, MSAR website, current students, good. Anybody else? When you say the website, that's absolutely right. I would also look for the mission statement of the school. That's really important. Okay, very good. Devon, you read my mind. Pre-med fairs and campus events. AMC has had a couple of excellent, yes, MSAR is great. AMC has had a couple of online fairs that were really, really good. If it's in a non-COVID world, you can try and visit the school. I'm not sure that the schools are open yet for applicants. And then there's networking. Talking to current students that you can, or recent alumni from your college that are now in different medical schools. Okay. You want to demonstrate how well you know their school and how much research you've been doing by establishing a clear understanding of what they offer that will benefit you and by helping you reach your career and educational goals. Space is always limited, so keep the essay very focused and select only the most relevant and important reasons why you want to attend their school. And if it's still too long, cut something out that's less important to you. What are some things you can include as a reason for wanting to go to a particular school? In the chat window, please. I don't know why you can't see other people's responses, but I'm reading them, so I hope you'll Research. Okay, good, Devon. Specific community outreach programs. I think if you change it to panelists and attendees, everybody will be able to see. A specific community outreach program. Good, Nikki. Early authentic clinical experiences. Good. Electives they offer. Good. Good. These are all good. I would also suggest that you look at where they place graduates in terms of residencies. If you have some direction within medicine, if you know, for example, that you're interested in orthopedics and orthopedic surgery, maybe the school does really well in terms of residency placements in that area. Again, primary care versus specialties. Those are things that are also items you can research and could play a role in why you choose a particular school. I wouldn't make that. Okay, so Andrew's asking, does talking too much about residency aspirations hurt you? I mean, I think if you sounded rigid in terms of your residency aspirations, that would sound a little bit foolish and it could hurt you. But if you say, I'm open to other things, but at the moment I think I'm interested in cardiology or orthopedics or whatever, and that's fine. Okay. Especially if that's based on some volunteering that you have done or some clinical exposure that you've had. And then the third type of questions that I mentioned are essay questions about you and them. For example, Columbia's Vagelos College of Physicians and Surgeons values diversity in all of its forms. How will your background and experiences contribute to this important focus of our institution and inform your future role as a physician? And they give you 300 words for that. Now, these questions require that you balance enough detail about you and about their program and how you would fit in. So you really, there you could start out with, again, looking at your timeline and focus on what hasn't been checked off for this particular application. And then what distinctive element in your background, identity, experience, or perspective can you contribute to Columbia's medical school, right? How will your background and experiences contribute to the important focus of our institution, right? Which is the value of diversity. So when have you advocated for diversity? When have you helped people from marginalized backgrounds to overcome bias or their circumstances? And you may want to adjust some of your experiences. In other words, if you have a leadership experience that also shows diversity, a commitment to diversity, then you may decide to choose a different leadership experience, right? Columbia Medical School also asks about leadership. So again, approach the secondary application strategically so that you are answering all the questions, giving them more reasons to accept you, and really engaging them with your essays. Now, we touched on briefly the importance of timing. You want to return secondaries promptly, ideally within 2 weeks from receipt. And the reason for this is very, very simple. Interview invitations are issued on a rolling basis at almost all programs. If your applications are evaluated as they come in, interview invitations go out as applications are evaluated. And the pool of interview invitations available just shrinks with the passage of time. I think Ryan Gray likes to compare this part of the process to musical chairs, which you probably remember from childhood. So it's critical that you turn around secondary applications promptly. Again, we recommend within 2 weeks of receipt and without compromising quality. So for those of you who have not yet started receiving secondaries and have already submitted your primary, I would urge you to start pre-writing secondaries. Look up some of the schools you're most interested. Look up their secondaries from last year and start pre-writing them. Because when they come in, you'll be so much ahead of the game if you've already pre-written some secondaries. And Carly, could I ask you to post the link to our secondary essay tips? Okay. Now, there are various techniques that you can use to tighten your writing, because in all these essays, whether it's a primary or the secondary, you're going to have character and word limits. And you just have to be concise and to the point. You want to demonstrate that you can write and communicate clearly and concisely. Whether your essay is longer or shorter, what is the point you're trying to communicate? What's the theme of the essay, the thesis? Make sure that point is clear and exclude anything that isn't necessary to make that point. Most secondaries, not all, but most are short. 300 to 500 words is pretty typical. And again, you have to be very, very focused and write in such a way where you're carrying the reader along with you by use of a clear theme and transitions and excluding anything that's extraneous. Another way to make your writing more engaging and more concise is to write concretely. Use sensory language whenever possible. So I happened to be looking at a candle the other night and the flame burned. But you know what? It also kind of jumped around and maybe it danced. Now I could say the flame burned, or I could say the flame danced, and I'm communicating a lot more. Another way to be more powerful in your writing and remain concise is to quantify whenever possible, especially your impact and contribution. I can't tell you how much we work on this with our clients over and over again. So if you were head of a committee, how many people were on the committee? And what was the impact of your involvement? How many people did you help? How much money did you raise? How many members joined your group as a result of your initiatives? That really, really magnifies the impact of what you've done. You can also use metaphors to succinctly make concepts more real and relate them to the familiar. You could say, I'll never forget that event. Or you could say, that event was tattooed in my memory. Again, tattoo in this case, obviously it's not in blue ink on somebody's brain. It's tattooed in their memory. It's indelible. Again, in terms of writing techniques, you really want to get a lap band for your writing or put it on a diet. Okay. Tape measure there. And here are some techniques for creating that diet for your writing and writing more succinctly. Okay. You could say the patient was cured by the doctor, or you could write the doctor cured the patient. And guess what? The latter is 5 words. The former is 7 words. And if you write the former is called passive voice, the subject of the sentence is not doing anything, completely passive. The second sentence, the doctor cured the patient, the doctor is the subject of the sentence and is active. He's doing something. It's more engaging, it's more succinct, it's usually clearer, and it's one really good way to tighten your writing, keep your writing in the active voice. If you can also use verb forms of words instead of nouns or adverbial forms. So for example, you could say, I came to the conclusion, I made the decision, right? Or you could simply say, I concluded, or I decided. And again, it's much more succinct, much less wordy. You could write, she went hurriedly, or you could say, just use the verb form of hurriedly, she hurried. These are techniques that will make your writing more concise, more effective, and allow you to provide more information in your essays. You can also, again, keeping on this diet for your writing, just eliminate unnecessary phrases and words. So you could say, I had the opportunity to serve as an EMT. Now, in the chat window, how would you shorten that? I was an EMT. Okay, that's definitely short. But you don't have the concept of service. I served as an EMT. That's what I would do. Right. Right. Nikki and Sam, that's what I would choose. I served as an EMT. Because there you also have I served. And I like that better than I was, though I was is more succinct. And here's the last 3 tips for checking your secondaries or your primaries for those of you, 24% of you who haven't yet submitted them. You want to, first of all, make sure that your essays address the question and reveal fit. And what are a couple of key elements of fit? I know we discussed this before, but this is really important. Okay, what are 2 key elements of fit? Anybody want to say in the chat window? Well, alignment between the school's strengths and your goals, and between what you're looking for in medical education. Okay, past experience is good. What you're looking for in medical education and what they provide. This is particularly important if you're adapting your secondary from another school's application. You don't just copy and paste. Don't copy and paste, please. Yes, I'm sure you know that you should make sure you change the school name, but it happens every year that somebody doesn't. But it's more than that. It's really making sure that you show this alignment, okay? You also want to check for grammar, spelling, and style. You want to proof your applications because you want your applications to reflect attention to detail and communications ability, not the opposite. Except it has a podcast, Admissions Straight Talk, and I've interviewed many admissions directors for that podcast. Jennifer Welch, admissions dean at SUNY Upstate, she said in one of them, and I'm quoting, "You are not going to be able to make those mistakes on patient charts. So why are you doing it on the application?" So really just thinking about those things when you are putting it together is really imperative. End of quote. Make sure your grammar, your spelling, your punctuation, capitalization, etc., is correct. I'm not talking about the stuff you should have learned in high school, basically. Now, we'll get to, I know Andrew asked about the returning promptly. We'll get to that in a minute. But again, you want to return your secondaries quickly without compromising quality. I recommend that you aim for not more than 2 weeks after receipt. And this is not just me. I've heard this over and over again. So, in conclusion, what are successful secondaries? Successful secondaries are well-written, concise, persuasive, promptly returned applications that answer the questions, reveal fit with the schools that you're applying to, the individual school, and add to the school's understanding of you. I'll repeat that. They are well-written, concise, persuasive, promptly returned applications that answer the questions, reveal fit, and add to the school's understanding of you. We're going to start the Q&A in a minute, but I have a question for you folks. What was the most valuable piece of information, advice, or insight that you got from today's masterclass so far? In the chat window, please. Past experiences. Okay, thank you, Emily. Anybody else? Life timeline. Good, good. You might even consider dividing your communication skills. Good, Yuma. Thank you. When you do your timeline, you could start everything before college, then post-college, if you are post-college. Okay, great. Thank you. I've spoken with hundreds, if not thousands, of medical school applicants like you, striving to get into medical school and challenged by the sheer work required in this process. It is a tough process. And also concerned that they may not make the cut. We at Accepted know how difficult this process is, and we're here to help you. Your goal is to apply confidently and successfully to the best programs for you. You're at a crossroads now. You can take the do-it-yourself approach, or you can invest in your professional future. Every year, we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected that they would work with us. They would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. Why? Well, our clients benefit from the know-how supplied by experts applying their expertise to their applications on an individual basis. No matter how hard I try in a masterclass, webinar, or podcast, the advice I provide has to be general. But when you work with a consultant, the advice is geared to you and specific. Given the complexity of the application process and the stakes, you need a guide who knows the process inside and out and who can support you through this grueling journey. You need Accepted to be your guide. When you engage Accepted, you can access professional expert advice, experience, objectivity. You can save time, apply with confidence, and apply successfully. We have the admissions experts, the guides, who can mentor you through the process so that you achieve your goal of applying confidently and successfully. Former admissions directors, staff members, postbac program directors who have been on the other side evaluating applicants and who can mentor you through the application process. Last year, we surveyed our clients and they enjoyed a 95% acceptance rate. Now, the secondary application, okay, here we go. You see here that there are two options. Again, the minimum investment is $340. The secondary application package, you can see it's a comprehensive flat rate option. With hourly, you use what you need, and obviously you can choose what's right for you. And where would you choose it? There you go. You go to accepted.com/medical/services, choose the service that's right for you, get the guidance you need to apply to the high level advice I've given here to your specific situation, and go from confusion to clarity and from doubts to confidence. So some of you may say, isn't accepted expensive? Well, we are. I'm not going to say we're not, but so is rejection. And rejection can actually cost multiples of our fees. Our fees are clear, but the cost of rejection is not as obvious, even though it can be significantly higher. If you look, you have the cost of reapplication, which can be $125, $150 per application if you're not applying through the fee assistance program. So if you apply to 20 schools, you're probably looking at close to $3,000. You have a year of earnings at a much lower level than if you earn your MD or DO degree, because you're just at the beginning of your career now. And there's a potential that you could have gotten into a better program, perhaps with greater lifetime opportunity and even earnings. But enough from me. What do accepted clients say? Well, I'm not going to read through all of them, but I'll read through some of them. I had a great experience working with Alicia. Her guidance helped me navigate smoothly through the medical school application process. Even some difficult to answer secondary questions, I didn't struggle. Her tips for interview preparation were awesome. Or, Dr. Gordon has been responsible in editing my secondaries, preparing me for my interviews. I still remember Dr. Gordon and I spent 7 or 8 drafts just on one 250-word secondary essay, which I believe played a huge role in my acceptance to that medical school. It was accepted, this person was accepted to Northwestern, Emory, University of Michigan, and UCLA. I feel very fortunate to work with Dr. Barry Rothman during this application cycle. Under his guidance, I was successful in receiving admission into medical school. Barry ensured my application, both primary and secondary, correctly highlighted my strengths. Or the last one, I wanted to share my exciting news. I will be attending the University of Washington School of Medicine. I received an email from the Dean of Admissions stating that I'm awarded a Hefty Scholarship. I'm feeling blessed and excited right now. Now, we'd love to help you as we help these clients, the ones you wrote, whose comments you just heard or saw, and thousands of other clients over the last 25 years. So once again, this is what I recommend you do. It's on the screen as a follow-up to today's webinar. Visit accepted.com/medical/services, choose the service that's right for you, get the guidance you need, and apply confidently and effectively. And for webinar registrants only, we have a special gift. Again, it's $100 off any order over $12.50. Coupon code is SUCCESS, and you can take advantage of it with any service that you find at accepted.com/medical/services. And now let's go to your questions. Let me just open up the question window. You're welcome to post additional questions now. And maybe I'll turn on my camera so you can, there's much to look at, but you can see me at least if I can't see you. Okay, so I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Kwanging asked for adversity questions. What if you experienced adversity when you were young? Would you still only try to limit to college experience? You know, this is one of those questions I think I'd have to see both the prompt and know a little bit more about the details. But in general, with adversity questions, the point of the question is not so much what hardship you suffered, but how you overcame it. So, you know, if you, let's say, went to a poor elementary school, then you've been overcoming it, overcoming the poor foundation, educational foundation ever since. I think, you know, again, I think I just need more detail here to answer it. But the focus of the adversity questions isn't just what happened to you, it's your response to that event. I like to give the analogy, when my children were young, we bought a double stroller. I had children close together and actually had 6 kids. And when the youngest was no longer needing it, he was probably 1 or 2. So he was still using the stroller. The stroller broke. It had a metal frame. We didn't want to get another stroller because we knew we weren't going to, to need it that much longer, and it was rather expensive. And I found somebody who would solder the broken pieces back together. And I asked, is this going to be like a weak spot? Is this going to break again and again? He said, no, a solder is stronger. So the point here is that if you've gone through adversity and overcome adversity, that you are stronger than the piece that has never been tested. Okay? You didn't, maybe there was a problem, maybe even you broke a little bit, but you're fixed and stronger than ever before. I hope that helps somewhat. All right, Andrew asks, can you help me understand why there is a 2-week recommendation for every secondary, regardless of when it was received? Shouldn't the date it is ultimately submitted be more of a metric to go by? For example, I got most of my secondaries back the first day they came out, so I don't have more of a time cushion. I mean, I think what you have to do is prioritize. Our recommendation is turn them around in 2 weeks. And the reason is, much like I said, the more time goes by, the fewer interview invitations are going to be out there. Now, if you got your secondaries the first day that you could possibly have gotten them, you obviously submitted early, and nobody is going to be, like counting and checking off, did Andrew return it in 2 weeks? It's just that it's to your advantage to return them. And the other part is, okay, so may I ask how many secondaries you have? I'm sure it's a significant number, but 31 applications. And do you intend to submit secondary applications for all of them, or how many secondaries did you get on that one day? 23 secondaries back so far. Well, first of all, congratulations. That's good. I had 12 that first day. Yeah. All right. Look, if you start working on one a day, maybe write one, revise one the next day, you should be able to get most of them out in that 2 weeks. Now, again, this is not like they're taking roll on you, whether you get it out. Yeah, well, you are drowning in work and have a part-time job. Yeah, that is tough. It really is tough. They're not going to downgrade you if you take an extra week for some of them. Focus on the ones probably in state that you're most interested in. Get those out for sure in 2 weeks, and then do the best you can with the rest. It does come in a deluge, and it is hard. I'm very sympathetic. Okay, but again, they're not taking roll. Does that help? You're welcome. Okay, I have one more question here, and you're welcome to pose additional questions. Can you talk about childhood events in the autobiographical essay? You can, but again, keep the focus more mature. We occasionally do see essays where the focus is very much on, grandparents' illnesses and childhood visits to the doctor. And the applicant does end up coming off as rather immature. So try and focus. If you start out with that, it's okay, it's autobiographical, but focus much more on the more recent mature events, show you shouldering more responsibility with a mature perspective, and not leaving somebody wondering, what have you been doing lately? Does that help? It does. You can definitely talk about it a little bit. You're welcome. All right. I happen to see a question in the chat window. I'm supposed to be looking just at the question window. So if you want to, here, I'll just read it. Rana asks, a secondary asks to list and briefly, here we go. Thank you. It is easier. A secondary asks to list and briefly describe my volunteer experiences. I'm unsure to change what I put from my primary activities into it. Well, some of that would depend on how much room you have. All right. Could you go into more detail? Could you talk about a specific person that you helped through your volunteer experiences? Again, can you talk about perhaps a teamwork challenge that you had or leadership challenge that you had, as opposed to just describing the experience. Um, I don't know. Again, I don't know how much room you have on that secondary. Hope that helped. Okay. Any other questions? Not, I want to thank you for your time and your attention, your answers, your questions, your participation. You've been a wonderful audience. Final story, a thought, and a question. A question that I have for you. There is one more question. More question, I think. No, not another question. Question I would appreciate your help with. I have a question for you. The story. Sally accepted to work with her as to work with her. She is an Asian American who had good stats and a fairly strong, but also fairly typical profile. Her consultant coached her through the process, including coaching to overcome shyness in interviews. Here is what Sally wrote to us after her acceptance. I don't think I would be at the same place today without your help. So out of 20 secondaries, not quite as many as Andrew has, but out of 20 secondaries, I received 18 interviews. I went to 11, accepted to 5, and waitlisted to 4. Well, obviously, Sally's results were great, and the most obvious benefit of working with Accepted, there was another one, less tangible, but no less important. Sally was more confident throughout the process. She was less anxious even during her interviews. She considered herself an introvert and admitted to being, quote, very nervous, close quote, about the interviews before she worked with Accepted consultant Sydney Foote. And now that I have a final thought I would like to share, and we've discussed crucial differences between the primary and the secondary, as well as approaches for the most common kinds of secondary essay questions. We've discussed how to tighten your writing so you can make the most of every word and character. And the clients you've heard from benefited from having this advice applied to them and to their essays individually. They are now in medical school. Follow their footsteps and get accepted. Now, the question I promised, I'm wondering again if you could answer it for me and just help me out with it. You folks have very kindly stayed for the presentation, the masterclass. You stayed for the pitch. You stayed for the Q&A, and now you stayed for the close. You certainly seem to be interested in what I have to say. It would be very helpful for me to know if you're not already a client or planning to become a client. Would you be willing to share why you're not engaging with Accepted one-on-one? Applying in 2022 cycle. So you're applying next year. Okay, that's fine. For 2023, I assume, right? Right, I got it. Some people do benefit a lot by engaging with us just for an hour advice in terms of what are the things they should be focusing on in the year before they apply. What activities perhaps should they focus on? Rana Alam. Oh, right. Okay, can't afford it. I understand. Are you using the fee assistant program? Rana, using the fee? No. You know, again, a couple of hours might save you from reapplying, and that's far more expensive than our fees. But we also have PayPal on the site and Affirm. Now, PayPal gives everybody 6 months to pay, no interest. But if you go beyond the 6 months, it's pretty expensive. And Affirm allows you to pay over 36 months, but they do charge interest. These are not, we don't collect the interest. We actually pay more for that service. Right. Okay. So those are some options. Again, you don't have to go for the most expensive package. You can choose to work with us on an hourly fee basis, which means that you control how much you spend. But sometimes a small investment can have major returns. All right. But I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts here. Anybody else want to share? Okay. I really appreciate your time, your attention. your participation, and I want to wish you all much luck with your medical school application. Take care.